This is the Umbrella Hour with Dr. On. And today I have a guest speaker who has a plethora of knowledge when it comes to transgender care. The Umbrella Hour is about identities that fall under the umbrella. This is so important for everyone to be aware that there aren't just two identities. We also need to be aware there are indigenous groups across the world who for centuries have never related to male pronouns or female pronouns. They relate as to spirit, and also that is their identity and oftentimes their expression. Welcome, Dr. Kristie.
Hey, Dr. On, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so tickled that you are here, and I want you to share with us how you even started on this journey.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story because for me, I'll put it out there. I'm a cisgender female and an ally and advocate. So it's really important that everyone knows the space that I'm coming from today is of that. And the reason I get the opportunity and privilege to work with the LGBTQIA plus community is from the community letting me walk side by side. Now we're at a little over 16 years of experience clinically working. I started out in the addiction field when I became a therapist and noticed that this community, specifically the LGBTQIA plus, those struggling at times with their gender identity, were having issues with addiction and not being able to be themselves. There was so much transphobia. And I got that opportunity at that time to start working with that group of clients and their stories, their journey, their barriers they were dealing with. It just clicked. Something in me clicked that says this is a community that I need to really help and support. And it's their journey, them letting me be there with them all these years is why I'm here and be able to have this platform to speak today. For me, especially as an ally, it's really important that I stay in my own lane in that way, meaning like I don't want to someone to think that I'm out educating or taking up space. I want to make more space, especially with the cisgender privilege that I have. And, I get to spend my time educating, advocating, teaching, training, speaking, not just in the area of transgender, non-binary healthcare, but with relationships as well, because regardless of our identities, relationships and how we connect, whether it's in a romantic relationship, our familiar relationships, or even our healthcare relationships are really important.
That is so true. I think also for someone who's transitioning, so I'm a trans guy, I express what I term genderqueer, and going through a relationship that can be a hardship for perhaps the partner who had one idea of who they were living with, opposed to what they were now asked to step up to doing. And that stepping up to doing, as you know, you deal with it all the time, is getting people to be true to themselves and also allow their partners that same regard. Can you talk a little bit about those struggles for people?
Yeah, and what I see most common is especially partners who have a loved one who is starting to explore their gender or going through a transition space or just trying to figure out who their true self is. They themselves have their own transition in a way of a lot of times their sexual identity, their sexual expression, and what's going on for them. And I like that you said the step up, because seeing it as a step up means like I'm stepping up, I'm evolving, I'm figuring out what this might mean to support. There's different struggles that they deal with, from having to relook at their identity as how it's seen in our society and how they see themselves, as well as seeing someone they care about and love go through medical changes, physical changes, emotional changes, lots of changes. And it's really important that that partner takes care of themselves so they can stay their healthiest self, so they can do what they want to do, which is support their loved one. It's a two-way street that both people, or however many people are in that relationship dynamic, hold space for themselves to evolve and change, because it's a big evolution all around.
Particularly when we hear the reference of someone insisting that, whether it's their partner or family member or friend, use their pronoun that helps them recognize who they are as that human being. There are a lot of struggles for people around it. Some people get very angry, other people shut down, some are very stealth and they pass right over it, they don't acknowledge it. What are some of the recommendations you have for families who will say, I've known you your whole life and you were always this to me?
Yeah, it can be really hard for families, and families go through their own journey as well, just like partners do. And for the family to prepare yourself to go through these different stages, and some parents describe it as their own grief process. And I understand there's a lot of people that maybe even get offended by that, feeling like, wait a minute, it's not a grief. I'm still here. I'm actually who I'm supposed to be. However, allowing your family member the space to go through those stages of grief, of the change, of the loss of what they thought was, to get to bring up and accept who you really are. To have an array of emotions is really an understatement, especially for parents. There's times where you may feel, sad, you might feel angry, you might feel resentful, and you might feel happy. Then you may have a wave of emotions and tears that come up out of nowhere when something might trigger a memory or a thought. And a lot of it depends on, as a parent or family member, your support system. Do you have someone that's non-judgmental of you, that's going to support you, hear you, hold space while you get upset, or hold space while you celebrate? Again, regardless of that relationship, romantic, familial, whatever that relationship may be, it's important that that parent or that family member takes care of their mental and emotional health through the process, so that they can support, hold space for their loved one. Because if we're not tending to ourselves, we definitely can't tend to someone else. For parents that say, hey, I've always known you as this person and now that is changing, it can be hard for some individuals to see from a parent or family's viewpoint, because they're having a hard enough time like going through their own transition. It's hard to really think about what someone else might experience as. But what I would encourage them to do is think, hey, like, if I give grace and give flexibility and patience to this family member so that they go through their part, it's possible that they're going to be supportive of me too. The other thing that's important for individuals to know, that it's okay to hold boundaries too, to parents and families. Your parents or families may not be or ever be supportive. So you're going to have to be able to set a boundary and say, hey, do I need to limit my time around them? Can I limit my time around them? Can I let them know, hey, I can't allow this to be in my space. It's not healthy for me. It's okay to set emotional and time boundaries with family members that are not going to be supportive. There's a way to do that that's healthy and respectful and keeping you emotionally and physically safe.
You work with organizations and small businesses, and in particularly, you've done a lot of work in the healthcare industry, helping healthcare practitioners do better. Can you talk about your model program?
Sure. This started out those, 16 plus years ago when I started working with the community and having the providers. In this case, it was nurses, physicians, medical assistants, laboratory folks, medical record folks, and mental health caregivers that they didn't really have the language when we have someone that was coming through that was a transgender female, or someone that was coming through that was bisexual, or someone that was coming through that was genderqueer. There was all this, we're not sure where they're to be located at when patient rooms. We're not for sure what to put in the charts. We're not for sure how to introduce them to the community. And so we really had some learning curves where those individuals, allowed us to work with them, learn. And so on my end, I tried to gobble up as much information that was there back in the day and try to learn as much as I could. And it started out as what we used to call sensitivity training back in the day, where we'd say to organizations and train everyone to be sensitive, where that has obviously evolved to cultural competencies, diversity and inclusion and equality. And through that, what I developed several years ago was a transgender dignity model. So this healthcare model is included in 8 areas that any wellness provider, whether it's behavioral health, medical wellness, such as spas, estheticians, different providers, can really understand their transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer clients that they're working with the best that they can, and give dignity care. And dignity really stuck out to me because there was no better word for me to describe as a provider giving these clients the dignity and respect they deserve. So I have some folks that'll say, well, everyone deserves dignity. Well, of course, we all deserve dignity and respect. But what we know from the stats, from the studies, from all of people's stories, we know that specifically transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer individuals don't get that respect. They don't get that dignity. It becomes a lot of times about that person's identity versus their whole self and person when it comes to specifically healthcare. And there's so many hoops, barriers, and lines they have to cross just to get care that me as a cisgender female that I don't have to cross to get the same type of care in some examples. So with that being said, taking those 8 models, putting it into a digestible learning system and giving a certification to really help wellness and healthcare providers really separate themselves and say, hey, I know I can give this dignity care and I'm a safe place for you. So it's developed over the years, and it's really incredible to be able to give trainings and to really broaden that and learn and change as we get, more terminology, more language, and really hear more case studies. So it's ever evolving.
Thank you, Dr. Kristie. And now we will take a commercial break. We'll be back shortly.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
All right, we are back from our commercial break. The frontline office people, what I've encountered as a trans person, they're not always up to the task. Perhaps lack of training, perhaps they were left out of the training or they weren't considered as part of the training. And I know that you address that being the utmost concern, because when we walk through that door, the first people we are in touch with are those front desk people who sit around that counter and are taking our information. What were some of the nuances that kept coming up for you when you were doing this work in these areas with care or a hospital setting? What kept coming up that you felt needed fine-tuning?
I'll start right there with what you said with the frontline staff. And it's those individuals that we find that get the least amount of training because they think, oh, we need to heavily invest in clinical or the providers or other skill sets. But those frontline person, it doesn't matter if it's the security guard, it's the house keepers or the environment of care providers that are there, or like I said, security guards, receptionists. Those folks are the first people that come into contact with clients and with people seeking services, and they get the least amount of training. So what we teach and work with is taught to all levels. Now, sure, they may not be giving clinical care, but it's just as important they understand, because many people, will say, well, I don't know anyone who is LGBTQIA+, specifically transgender non-binary. I like to say it's highly likely you do. They may not have come out to you yet, or you've known someone, maybe it's an acquaintance that, it's not their story to share with you at that time, but you've known, you've worked with, you've seen people. And really normalizing that most of these folks, it's not, I will say, it's not from a lack of not wanting to give good care. I do believe in my heart, in general, people want to do the next right thing, but they don't have the comfort to do it because they've not been given the opportunity to get the training of language or to how to ask questions in a way that's welcoming. And to really embrace individuals for being themselves. And so equal investment in training of the frontline staff is crucial, because the culture of the organization is seen at the front door, not back behind in the back office. And that can ruin a person's experience immediately. For an example, I've been sitting in waiting rooms and lobbies where they would come out and use an incorrect name to bring somebody else in, and just to see the horror of their face of being misgendered, of using incorrect name, meaning not the correct name. They may have seen a legal name on a medical record to call them back. It's just really preventable. One of the other nuances that pops up especially in behavioral health, I find, especially with working with youth and young adults, is behavioral health providers say, well, they've changed their name again, or they want to go by a different name or a different set of pronouns. And someone will say, well, how are we supposed to keep up? I said, well, it's not about keeping up. It's continuing to address and listen to what that individual needs, wants, and desires to be referred to as, because that is a part of the spectrum and of the evolution of an individual. We get so focused in what we used to thought was this binary system. Like you said, it's either male or female, and that's not the case at all. We've proven that the system isn't binary. Therefore, people's experience in evolving their own self will not be an absolute fixed place for majority of people. So, helping organizations understand the continued need for training. For me in the field, I have to continue training and being aware and listening, because what I find, especially as allies, if we ever think that we've got it figured out, if we ever think we've got all the nuances figured out and done, we're in big trouble, because that means we're not listening enough. So that's one of the biggest things with organization takeaways, is that we're constantly learning and evolving as long as we're listening.
It is such a struggle for many people to even be able to recognize that it is possible that there are people who are different in so many ways, particularly with identities. And the younger generation, such as the 13 to perhaps 17-year-olds, but even the young adults who change their names as they're transitioning and getting comfortable with who they are, that it really isn't that simple to find a name that is fitting and suitable and comfortable, that a person can live with for the rest of their lives. So yes, there are a number of these young individuals, and I preface young, I'm sure there are possibly older individuals who do the same, who decide, I really don't like that name. It's just not working for me. And how difficult that is for the mainstream individual who is cisgender and has never, ever even had to think about changing their name. They're raised with it. They're comfortable with who they are, and they walk through life not ever questioning it.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that is something that most cisgender individuals don't realize or think, and that so many aspects of we don't mean as being cisgender. Like, I don't think about so many different things that someone who's transgender, non-binary, genderqueer thinks about on a daily basis. So it's important that we point those things out like that.
One of the most eye-opening experience I had was some years ago when I had an interview with a transgender man and his wife at the time, also transgender woman. And they were talking about their baby pictures. And it was very interesting, because I had just come through a series of experiences with a younger group of people who wanted those baby pictures thrown out. They didn't want to be reminded. And the families were struggling. The parents were grieving because they needed those pictures. That was part of their birthing experience, their memories. And both of them said that they didn't throw their baby pictures out. They had oftentimes gone back and were able to laugh and giggle about who they were at the time. Just the enjoyment of seeing the things that they did as kids, the expressions they had. And he said they didn't get hung up on the gender piece, because they knew as of that day who they were, and they were very comfortable as that individual. Have you ever had those discussions with individuals who were struggling with their trans child or young adult wanting to discard their memories?
Absolutely. This comes up so frequently. We have a parent, partner, family of transgender, non-binary loved ones support group each month. And this comes up so often, where you have a parent where, I'll say the kid or their child had said, hey, I'm coming home for holidays. Please put the pictures away. And they're like, wait a minute, that's a part of my birthing story. That's a part of us being a family. Or what about the rest of the family? So for many parents, depending on where they're at, I'll say in their journey, their place of acceptance, their place of trying to support their child, they'll understand, hey, okay, I'll put these away. I'm keeping them for me, but I don't have to have them up on the wall in the middle living room. I get it. And there's others that says, no, this is part of who you are. We're going to have it out there. You're going to have to deal with it. And those are like harder for the individuals that are understandably struggling with that. But there is a balance, and there's a way that parents can keep their pictures, but maybe not put them out in public where it's facing that child every time they're coming home or around when, that child is growing up. I think what we really have to do is give, especially parents and families and partners too, their individuality to be themselves in this relationship, to call the shots around where they're at, what their needs are, while the loved one also comes in and says, well, this is where I'm at. This has to be a collaboration. And this is the foundation of each of those relationships. Again, our romantic ones, our familial ones, our friendships, extended families. It's got to be a collaboration of both. It can't be this compromise where you kind of get locked in and feel like neither sides are winning. So for that parent out there that might be struggling, like, no, we use the term should be able to have these photos out when I want. You're my kid. I did this. But asking them to say, like, if the roles were reversed, if there's a picture that you didn't like that made you feel really bad when you looked at it or brought up a really negative memory, would you want to look at it? And maybe that parent would say, well, no, I don't want to look back at that picture. Well, that might be what's going on for your kid too. So if you can look at it from this collaboration versus it's like negotiation, it'll make it a lot smoother for everybody.
That's so important. And I'm glad you stressed that, because I know that people have also had this experience where they threw everything out and then had regret once they got through their transition and they recognized that it is collaborative. And unfortunately, there are times where people clash and it's either my way or the highway. So we do see a lot of children, particularly, and I'm referring to the teenager who is already going through a rebellious stage, whose family member may be so strict that their boundary setting is it's my way or the highway, and they find themselves without a home or any space to really call their home. How do you deal with those situations?
It's really tough because that does happen. Let's say if they are able to stay within the home, the teenager's able to stay within the home, the parents is like, no, most common one I hear is, well, when you turn 18 and move out of this house, you can go do what you want to. You can decide to be who you are. But in this house, you're going to be whoever it might be. In those kind of situations where you've got housing secured, the best thing that you can do for yourself is like, where can I get support? Can I get support at school? Can I be myself at school? Do I have some support online? Do I have some support groups where it's confidential and free and I don't have to get permission? Is there people that I can talk to while I'm like visioning and dreaming and looking at me becoming myself? I know that's a lot easier said than done, but they're having some type of space and place to go to for support is crucial. Having someone to talk to. If someone has lost their home because it happens so often, individuals are kicked out of the house, finding a support within the community. Is there a friend whose parent is supportive that maybe you could stay with? Is there a hotline you can reach out to? Just really trying to secure safe housing and making sure that you are physically safe is the first priority.
What do you think is important for a provider to understand who's perhaps running a shelter and now they have a shingle that says women only, and this person who no longer has a place to call their home finds themselves looking for a safe space to be able to spend some time in until they can get to perhaps some permanent housing? What do you find might be the struggle for that person?
For the person finding or for that provider giving shelter and housing?
Providing and giving shelter housing.
Got it. So I think the hardest for many is to say, if I'm having, I think you mentioned a woman's shelter for safe place, and this individual's looking for, find shelter, give shelter. This person needs safety. Is there a space and privacy where they can have shelter? Well, first of all, we know specifically, women or transgender women are women. So if this kid's a transgender female, well, that would be great for the shelter. If there's someone who's non-binary or trans man or transmasculine, is there a way you can help safely house them until they get a resource that might be a better fit? Or if they don't feel comfortable going into that women's only shelter, but making sure that provider recognizes that women are all women, men are all men. And in that non-binary space is saying like, where is the safest place that you can go? Can we give you space along here that you're safety and have privacy at the same time?
Tell me, Dr. Kristie, in your line of work, what has brought you the most rewarding pleasure doing what you do, working with the LGBT community?
I get so full of emotion because it's really the most incredible thing in the world to be able to help, support, and love and see someone become their true self, really come into their own. And it's got zero to do with me. I'm just here hanging out, but get to be a part of the journey of working with individuals, whether it's in our support group or seeing individuals where one-to-one work, or hearing stories that are being shared about what they've been able to do, or hearing a provider that just gets it. You can hear them like, okay, I got it. Oh, I can do that. Like, this is so incredible to hear the stories. And I'm almost speechless because I always struggle to answer that, because there's so many really incredible emotions and feelings that I get. And in our support group last week, someone had come for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, this is a great support group. I'm loving this. Are you going to be doing this again?" I'm like, "We've been doing this since 2014. As long as y'all will have me, we will be doing this every single month. I'm not going anywhere as long as you'll have me." And I say that because it's the most rewarding thing that I get to do, is to get to be side by side with people going through their own journey, including the parent, partner, and families that are right there in it too. So to see people become themselves is just incredible.
All right, we will take another commercial break, and we will be back shortly.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Welcome back to the Umbrella Hour with Dr. On. Joining me today is Dr. Kristie Overstreet. I want to touch on a hard part of this conversation, because as we know, in the state of Florida, our governor, Governor DeSantis, while he's made some monumental changes, he's also knocked away, unfortunately, the sense of feeling secure as a for the trans community, LGBT, QIA community in general, because now to have these conversations in school, I think it's up to fourth grade. They can't talk about the subject itself, anything pertaining to gay, lesbian, or trans subjects. And I wonder how children can navigate through classroom time, especially during show and tell, when oftentimes in the lower grades, children get to talk about their parents, their siblings, their pets. Have you had anyone come to you with struggles on how to even deal with that situation?
Yeah, I've had educators reach out and been in conversation with educators about how they can most confidently help navigate the kids having these discussions, with knowing that, the ones reaching out to me are the ones supportive, saying, I'm going to allow that kid to talk. I'm not going to break that kid's confidentiality. They're showing something or they're talking about something. I'm going to help support that kid, but there's so many that are not. It's one of those things where, especially parents, there's so much fear that if their kid brings up anything about what's happening at home, or about their oldest kid that's going through a transition, is that kid going to be shut down? Are they not going to be encouraged? They're going to be talked about. They're going to be sent to the counselor's office. It's fear. There's so much fear going on within the schools, within the parents, and even within the kids themselves. The biggest thing that I can tell people, especially practicing in Florida, is, I'll speak for myself and so many, I think more providers than not. And providers, I'm talking about behavioral health. I'm talking about teachers. I'm talking about support organizations. Like, we're going to be here fighting for you. We're not turning against you. You're not left alone. You're not going to get that support. For the guidelines, I don't even get started on the guidelines that Department of Health put out. It's just insane. What they're saying is going to be okay and what's not okay, and someone's going to tell you how you're supposed to treat clients and give care. Like, that's it's all show, because that is not what's happening. Meaning, like, we're not going to follow any type of transphobia, any type of homophobia, any type of biphobia that is brought on by these Department of Health guidelines. And so much is based in that fear that, you're not going to be able to treat, you're not going to be able to get medication, you're not going to be able to get services. And, as long as we're here advocating, educating, that's not going to happen. The state can say what they want in the sense of regulation, but you can't tell me how to work with a client or how to work with a family. That's not your background.
I can only imagine the amount of anxiety that even the child carries with them, not knowing how to navigate that whole world of the possibilities that they may get into trouble. I was listening to BBC News, and in Scotland, there is an outpouring of individuals who do not want people to have the right to change their gender markers. It's really happening all over the world, I think, all this resistance to accepting the reality that there aren't just cisgender people in the world. People are fighting it. And you mentioned a very powerful word, which is fear. Bias really is the real reason why we have fear. Mm-hmm. And whether those associations go back to maybe an earlier experience or messaging, very negative messaging, whatever it is, we have yet so much work to do. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We've accomplished a lot. I think people have recognized more now than they've ever had in the past. And so I'm very happy to hear that people are reaching out to you and having these conversations, because everyone needs to be able to process this in some way. And if they can't process it at school, then who gets to do that? Where do they get to do that? Another area that is very concerning, and we're down to the wire now, Kristie, we have about 4 minutes. But another area are the providers who were providing hormone blockers to children, and this idea that this will forever damage a child. I hope to have another guest on who can speak to that, but we're seeing a lot of pushback even by hospitals who rely on state funding. They're afraid of losing their funding. And I secretly wish they could just stand up and rally in support of the trans community.
Yeah, me too. And I think there's so much misconception, there's so much misinformation out there about it, because you take one headline of, doctor stops child from becoming themselves. That's not really how it happens. And there's so much assessment, thought, consent from parents, there's so much goes into decision to move forward with a puberty blocker. It's not a one-stop shop. No one's doing surgeries on kids. There's the amount of misinformation. And if we already fear things we don't understand, we know that we've got a lot of education awareness to bring out there. Or these hospitals that are so worried about losing their funding. I hear that. I know you got to have your funding to be able to work. However, you got to be on the right side of history as things change and evolve. Going back to what you said earlier, about gender markers. It's amazing how people get tied up in not even their business, right? Like, my gender marker is my gender marker. Like, why would you get to decide what my gender marker is? Same thing with medication. I know what's best for my body, or my parent who's over me knows what's best for my body. Why would someone step in and try to regulate that? So, like I said, that's where more conversations, more shows like this, the more that we talk and put things out there, hopefully we can keep changing the narrative, because I run into people all the time, hatred, transphobic. And what I've learned is that when I started just saying, like, open heart, open mind, if you come with an open heart, open mind, we'll have a conversation. But if you're closed down and trying to pick and do, you're not going to go anywhere. So versus locking heads, going in and helping people understand these are real people. This is your kids. This is your siblings. This is your parents. This isn't some person out there, just out there in the universe. So the more we normalize this, because it is, the more individuals will have the best chance at having a prosperous, healthy, safe life. And that's really the goal. That's the most we can hope for.
I want to thank you for your time. But before I let you go, I want to know, do you offer the Dignity Model program outside of the U.S.?
I do. It's available for organizations and individuals. We do have a couple of individual physicians that are in other countries that have taken the model, as well as organizations. So yeah, it's a worldwide opportunity, because my goal is to make sure every single healthcare provider in the world is trained in that dignity care.
How can somebody get a hold of you?
You can go to my website, drkristieoverstreet.com. You can grab me on Instagram or on LinkedIn. And just send me a DM, send me a message, connect, and I'm just a virtual call away.
And drkristieoverstreet.com is spelled how?
Yeah, absolutely. DRKRISTIEOVERSTREET.
You've been listening to the Umbrella Hour with Dr. On. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us again.